I really should be letting this go. I really should, but you guys got me. You actually got to me. So after I posted yesterday, people were talking. Right. So the Mandela effect. Let's just give a brief explanation. Some people complain they didn't give an explanation. The Mandela effect is based on somebody online said, I remember Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s. And actually, it turns out he was in prison and he, came out of prison and died a free man at a very old age. And then other people joined in and went, I remember him dying in the 80s. I remember there were news reports. I remember his funeral procession. It was shown on the news and blah, blah, blah. I personally don't remember that. I have misremembered many things. And when Nelson Mandela died, I was shocked he was still alive. I was like, I thought he died 4 or 5 years ago. Those were my words. I thought he died 4 or 5 years ago, but I don't think he died in the 80s. I thought he died 4 or 5 years before he did. Why? Because with all due respect to the man, it's not like keeping up to date with Nelson Mandela's health was not a big part of my life at that time. So it's called the Mandela effect. And people remember things differently. And there are big things that people talk about where they go, no, it was that. Somebody yesterday was talking about Stanford, Connecticut, Stanford with an N. I went, no, they changed it from Stanford to Stamford with an M for mother, N for, so they thought it was N for November, Stanford. It's actually Stamford, Connecticut, an M. Just after a town in Lincolnshire that is famous for pottery. Why did they think it was Stanford? Why did they think it is Stanford when it is in fact Stamford? Well, because of the number of times you've heard the word Stanford. If it's higher, you get confused. I have gotten confused about place names in America before. Why? Because it's a fucking huge country, and there are many places named Stanford, and many places named Stamford in America. When I looked on Wikipedia yesterday, I think I found 8 Stanfords and 9 Stamfords across America. Which one would you hear the most? Stanford. I'm on a live call. Are you serious? Hello? I'm actually in the middle of a meeting. I can come down to her in 15 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much. Cheers. He's just randomly shown up at the science park. Never a good idea. Stanford prison experiment, very famous. Stanford University is very famous. Stanford is in California, not up in Connecticut, on the other side of the country. Why would you think it was Stanford instead of Stanford? Again, because you've heard it more. Stanford is much more satisfying to say. There are more stands in the English language than stam. The only stam I could come up with off the top of my head was stamp. You say instantly, you have famous characters like Stan Lee and Stanley Kubrick. It's much more satisfying to say Stan, so you remember it that way. The Dolly thing with the braces, I did this yesterday, and then I slept, and then I woke up today, and I'm like, no, I remember her with braces now. I remember her with braces. I'm like, these guys have got to me. They've actually got inside my head. I remember with braces. I broke it down. When would I have seen Moonraker? Probably haven't watched it since the 1980s. It's the kind of, I think we had it on VHS. And I used to love Bond movies when I was a little kid. I'd watch them over and over again. I particularly liked Roger Moore. He was my first Bond. So that Jaws, I liked Jaws when I was a kid. I'd pretend to be Jaws, like stuff. And I like that film. Obviously, as an adult, you watch it now and you're like, this is drivel. It's a bad film. It's important. It's not a good film. They weren't all good films. They were quite camp and they were quite cheesy and they were quite silly. That's an important point. I was like, why am I remembering it that way? I'm like, okay, maybe. And then I was like, well, maybe these people have a point. Maybe there is something weird going on here. So I went and found the scene and I was like, okay, here's what I'm looking for. If in the cut, the director shows Jaws's teeth in the center and then shows her teeth in the center, that means she's supposed to have braces on. So I went and found a clip of it, and Jaws is trapped under a big cartwheel. She comes over and helps pull it off him. And he takes it off, and then he stands and he turns to her and he goes, and then he sees her and he smiles, and his metal teeth glint in the sun. So the director is clearly going, look at his teeth. He looks down at her, and her teeth center shot. So we're clearly supposed to be looking at her teeth. The fact that she doesn't have braces is really weird. You want to know what I think happened there? You're supposed to have braces on. I found a script. There's no direction for the script in the script. That's the case. But the scene is shot. The whole joke of it is clearly supposed to be that she also has braces. Why doesn't she? The fact that she doesn't, I think, is just not very well directed. It's not a good film. She probably was supposed to, because that's the payoff. That's why are they connecting? Because she's pretty and he's a giant with teeth. Like it doesn't make sense without it. It's just bad. It's just poorly directed. I watched Glass last night. Glass. I'd watched Split the night before. I gave up on M. Night Shyamalan years ago. Yeah, I was just like, this is not a good director. I think he had one good film in him, and that was it. He's just not a good director. It's flim flam. And then a friend of mine said, no, you should watch Split. It's actually very good, and it gives James McAvoy is great, which he was brilliant, representing dissociative identity disorder. Split actually was quite a good film, tonally inconsistent. At points it gets into like horror movie stuff, and it's a bit graphic and nasty where it didn't need to be. It's not a fantastic film. It's a good film if you're going with low expectations. So the very next night I was like, oh, I actually quite enjoyed that. I'll go and watch Glass, which is the final part of a trilogy: Unbreakable, Split, and then Glass is the final part. Spoiler alert if you've not seen Glass. The point of Glass is it leads to a finale that takes place inside of a tower called the Osaka Tower. And there are numerous references to Marvel and DC just hidden in there to do with the Osaka Tower, the final showdown, which is obviously Stark Tower. I don't know what Mr. Shyamalan is trying to say. I don't know whether he's like references to the superhero movies that are out there. And the film is interesting, what it tries to explore psychologically and psychology of it. It's a above average in terms of its psychological fluency. Okay, great. And then it gets to the end of the film. It does very, very strange things. I don't know whether the guy needs an editor or he needs help or what it is. He basically ruins his own film with the ending of it. And spoiler alert, already given, you never get to the tower. They never actually fight in the tower. They never have the big showdown in the tower. Now, in hypnosis, this is a technique that is used to implant ideas in people's heads. If you're interested in it, I recommend you look up videos feature Derren Brown, Erren Brown, where, okay, so the technique is, I want to put something in your head. So I want to put the idea in your head. That's the first thing. So it's water. So I tell you a story, and I'll go, I went down to the beach and I was with the dog, and he looked out at the sea, and she wanted to be off the leash. I let her go. She just ran and ran and ran, and then splash, she went straight into the oh God, what was I going to tell you? I was actually going to tell you the other day. I was chatting to a mate of mine, and he was saying, you need to eat more vitamins and make sure that you're hydrated. He was saying to me, you need to drink at least like 1.5 liters in the morning of a bottle of, oh, fucking hell, I'm so sorry. But the other day, I was talking to a mate of mine, and he was teaching me how I would learn how to scuba dive, which means that you can breathe under the, right? So I keep stopping right before your brain, right before I do the payoff, which is water. So now your brain is going, water, water, say water, just say the word. That which is omitted conspicuously, the brain will put in. In neurolinguistic programming, which I think took this from General Semantics by Korzybski, this is called distorting, deleting, and generalizing. So when we have reality coming in, we distort it to fit previously existing prejudices and narratives. We delete that which we don't want to see, and then we generalize. So we actually start to build where, not in the mystic woo-woo sense, we are co-creators of our reality. You're not just taking reality fresh, you're adding to it. It must be interpreted. In order to interpret it, we must add to it. That scene everybody's talking about from Moonraker, it literally makes zero sense if the braces are not there. And I think what we've done is we've put them there because it's a bad film. It's just poorly directed. And that whole sequence, that whole joke, you never get the payoff. And because you're not getting the payoff, your brain constructs it.